Apparently, this is the most talked about novel this year, which is very interesting because I haven't talked about it to anyone. Um, I don't know anyone that's read it apart from Barack Obama, which is the reason I bought it. And the reason I bought it is Barack Obama is is a big fan of Marilyn Robinson, who I think is the greatest living writer, novelist. So I thought I'd buy it on that connection. Um, it's an interesting novel. I think it probably fails more than it succeeds. When it succeeds, it's extraordinary, but when it fails, it plummets. Um, what's interesting about it? It's a very good novel about disappointment, um, especially disappointment in marriage. But it's also, I mean, it's fantastically well written. I mean, she's clearly someone who cares about her sentences very much in the same way James Salter does, and occasionally though she achieves those notes that Salter achieves, but and when she does, and she does in a sustained way, the writing is fantastic, and the opening, and much of the opening is as good as Salter. Um, the key problem, I think, is that Salter's characters are dazzling in a particular way, and and they're dazzling from a distance. There's a detachment from their dazzle, where we don't have that here. Her two major characters are fantastically attractive and gifted in their own way. Um, and of course, they come with very damaged lives. But there is some kind of cloyingness about her interest in them. She finds them too appealing. This is Lauren Groff. And one feels that she's in the book too much. She's expressing herself too much, and and I think that one of the great problems with novels are when you feel the writer trying to express something in their life. And I'm sure I've been guilty of it, and I'm sure I will be guilty of it. I do hope my editor of my new novel um, gets the red pen out wherever I make that mistake, but that hasn't happened here. And because of that, it feels self-indulgent. It feels, because essentially it's a portrait of a marriage from two points of view, the husband and the wife. And it's very ambivalent about marriage, but it's also a little bit pleased with itself. And beyond two-thirds, it becomes the most extraordinary soap opera of dazzling people, dazzlingly creative people. In my last review, I talked about sort of the underworld of the UK, of the US. There was a Chinese immigrant and a war veteran. I mean, these people here are super educated, Vassar educated, playwrights, actors, and even though I think she absolutely pulls off the creative work that Lancelot really is involved in, he becomes a very successful playwright. I mean, I genuinely believe some of the ideas of plays are incredibly good ones, and that very rarely happens when a novelist tries to creates a character who is an artist of some sort. So in many ways, it's an extraordinary piece of work. Except it's that fault of closeness. It's that fault of not spotting that you, as a novelist, are trying too hard to create something you find wonderful in the book. It doesn't have Salter's aristocratic distance, a kind of unfeelingness. Is that right? Or certainly a lack of sentimentality. she cares about her characters too much, and it means that as readers we start to feel the novelist encroaching. Um, then when you read her acknowledgements, after the book, it puts it into perspective. It's very clearly some kind of expression about her own views on marriage and her own seemingly fantastically successful marriage, even though the marriage in this is not successful in that way. It's a problem. But if I think it's worth reading for two reasons. One, it is often fantastically written. Two, it is a decent portrait of a creative artist. It is brilliant about the disappointment of long marriages, but it just gets silly at the end, I'm afraid. But it's worth it. So that's my view on the most talked about novel of 2015. And my Christmas reading is going to be this is from Salt Publishing. Guy Wears the Fat of Fed Beasts. It's got obviously a great B-movie cover. I've read lots of slightly mad reviews about how great this is and how mad it is. So I'm looking forward to reading that, although I'm slightly ambivalent about the cover. I'm midway through David Markson's Reader's Block. Just for those who know, he's very formally inventive and interesting writer. The kind of thing on the front says, "No one but Beckett can be quite so funny and sad at the same time as Markson can." It's called Reader's Block. Reader is the name of the writer in it. But actually, just so you can see, which you probably can't, it's written in very short paragraphs. I mean, just short blocks. And it's essentially someone who is writing a novel struggles with their writing a novel, and it's kind of interpolated, and it's probably more facts of other creative artists than it is the actual novel he's writing. And so he merely says things like, a year before his death, already ill and with his recent work finding rejection, Baudelaire was shown essays eulogising him by two poets in their early 20s. Neither of them had yet produced a book of his own, making their names meaningless. Paul Verlaine, Stéphane Mallarmé. And then it says, literally the next line after a drop line, Chaucer's father was a vintner. Next line, Pasternak's popularity was such that if he stumbled over a line while reciting, most of his Moscow audiences was generally able to prompt him from memory. And then it will just say something about the character he's writing about, who is just called the protagonist. And it's extraordinary. And it somehow works as I'm loving it. And so we learn how he's thinking about creating a character, a very lonely, isolated, dispossessed character, and how he's building a past life. But he does that probably once a page. Meanwhile, he's just giving us these little things, these little notes. Sometimes it'll just be, one note here is 7 Eccles Street. I don't know what the reference to that is. Milton once visited Galileo. Robert Lowell was an anti-Semite. Every word she writes is a lie, including and the. Henry James paid for lessons to ride a bicycle. It's very extraordinary, but works, absolutely works. Coming Jakarta, a poem about terror by Peter Dale Scott. This is a book-length poem written in 3-line sort of blank verse, clearly based on Dante. He was a sort of CIA Mandarin, and it's about the CIA's involvement in Indonesia in the 60s. It's recommended by Robert Hass, a poem poet I admire, and it's essentially, I see this as a kind of companion volume to Zone, the great novel by Matthias N.R., published by Fitzcarraldo. I'm sort of trying to cajole the owner and editor of Fitzcarraldo to republish this because it's out of print. It's a very interesting poem. And then finally, Proust, The Search. It's a very short biography of Marcel Proust by I think he's some kind of Harvard professor, but it's got great reviews. I love Proust, and apparently, without needing to be really long, it gets to the heart of our fantastic Marcel, who I learned, if I'm right, I'm probably, unless I misread, the BBC have released all the archives of Desert Island Discs, and I think Proust just comes out top of those novelists that people want to take with them to the desert island. Length is obviously a consideration, as the actress said to the bishop. I think that is probably who I would take. So I do understand that. Okay, that's it. So I have the end of a very fine gin and tonic here. So happy holiday season to all of you, and I shall try and touch base in between Christmas and New Year. So cheers. Oh, that was strong. Cheers. Bye bye.